I'm Magic, and this is Sean. Together we make SMAC Game, which is Sean and Magic, so SMAC Games. Yeah. And we are building a game called Tokyo 42. What we wanted to talk today was about some of the influences that have driven our design. So it's a team of two that's making this game. So it's a fairly intensive process, and we kind of budgeted both our time and sort of in terms of money for about a year and a half of dev time. So when it came to making this game, we didn't have much time, so we had to make, and we also just didn't know what we were doing. So we had to make a lot of decisions really quickly. On top of that, we didn't know what we were doing, so we had to take from wherever we could. So what we wanted to show you today was, the game, obviously, but also some of the things that influenced us and we essentially stole from, but out of necessity. We will try and explain that in a bit. So what you can see here is a little bit further into the game. There's a mini golf corporation that runs out of this kind of Fifth Element style flying car area. And actually the mission around here does involve jumping onto the cars. So I'm just going to do like a quick tab. So I wanted to speak about the style to begin with, because it was actually one of our starting points. We wanted to make sort of a Where's Wally alike, but there's this other group of people called eBoy. Now this is already low res and crap, but they make these really cool Where's Wally images. So one of our dreams was to make this, but in a game. Now, the reality is that at the moment, our current machines would never be able to run this stuff in real time. There's a lot going on in that screen. And besides that, it would be totally unplayable. It's an absolute visual mess. So what we did was basically, in terms of the style, we combined that with this, which is Monument Valley. Now, obviously, Monument Valley is sort of one of the pinnacles of cleanliness of design and just legibility. And you know, what you'll see is actually in our game, there's stuff that we literally just took. So like the waterfall style and all that kind of stuff. We literally just took, Sean's going to jump to the waterfall here. Where it was like, how am I going to do the waterfall? Well, we'll just do it like they did it. And you'll see a lot through this game. There was a lot of decisions that happened because, you know, you have 10 minutes to figure out how it's going to work, make it, and then move on. Because I think, you know, we had to have all our core content done in about 6 months before we started on the tightening and the missions and all that kind of stuff. So everything had to happen on the spot. As I'm hoping you can kind of see how that combination works of Monument Valley and eBoy and what that. So let's see what the next slide is. Oh, obviously none of this is prepared, and I don't know why they put devs on stage because we're not good at this. So here's another point. Another starting point for our game was we wanted to make an isometric worms. This is a single-player portion of the game. It's kind of the open world, but the game actually started in prototype form as an arena-style multiplayer arena game. But we wanted to do full physics-based combat. What you can see here is that, you know, you'll probably see like the grenade style. We ripped stylistically straight from Worms because it was one of our favorite games, and it's kind of like what we wanted to kind of evoke, or we wanted to somehow follow in the footsteps of Worms. It's quite different, the game, obviously. And as you'll see, that we may say that we steal from other stuff, but the game did eventually become a thing of its own. But what Sean's doing there is throwing some bananas around. We had someone say to us, you know, well, seeing as you've got some, you know, Worms references, you should probably put some bananas in. And I don't know if you guys have played Worms, but the banana is like a massive explosive grenade. But in our game, it's just a banana, and that's all that it is. As in real life, if someone threw a banana at you, it would just kind of, I guess, bounce off you, and you'd look at it a bit and then kind of carry on with your life. So yeah, we also have a bunch of bananas, which also does nothing. So that is a late game unlock, though. Good luck to those people who find that. What's next on our thing? Can I tab out? Yeah. I guess this is kind of like where we both come from in terms of gaming is our first, we're brothers, by the way. It may not look like it, I don't know, he's also about a foot taller than me and better looking.
That's not true, right?
But our family first gaming machine was an Amiga. So the sort of team at Sensible and then sort of the early Psychnosis games. Games like Cannon Fodder and Lemmings and Sensible Soccer were kind of what informed kind of our upbringing. So when we were kind of thinking about we want to learn how to make games, so we want to make a game that's about gaming 101 and what we understood as the history of games. This was obviously our starting point. Cannon Fodder we played a lot, and in many respects, Sensible Soccer it's kind of like the other side, because Cannon Fodder has this kind of click to move thing, and Sensible Soccer is kind of a real-timey thing. So we're kind of somewhere in the middle.
I was just going to say, interestingly, I actually tried to make Cannon Fodder once in Flash, and it was really bad. But I've always wanted to redo Cannon Fodder in a way. So
yeah, and we had a lot of lofty ideas with Tokyo 42, but I think we've actually now gotten to a point in the game where it's funny, but it does feel a bit like a new Cannon Fodder, because we've stripped out a lot of functionality and a lot of the kind of crap that we'd put in over time. And whilst there is still a lot of that, and don't get me wrong, it's still pretty crap sometimes. I think the combat has now got, it does kind of, for me at least, does have some of the simplicity of those older games. And it kind of I'm like, yeah, we've done a bit of an old school thing. Obviously it's very different, and it's with the full 3D movement and stuff, there's a lot of complications, so you couldn't have made it back then. But yeah, so Sean's just showing off some more devastating weapons. This is kind of like the central area of the game where you kind of branch out, and we'll actually show you in a bit some of our inspiration for how the map works. Can I do a little tab, or are you going to?
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So next game, obviously Syndicate. And in this case, it's Syndicate Wars, and we have a stylistic inspiration from Syndicate. And actually, what Sean's now wearing the sort of Syndicate style gear, which is like the coat with the minigun, which is like your classic Syndicate get up. Actually, one of the things that happened was we were making an isometric 3D game, which people don't do. So what you generally do with these sort of things is you make a twin-stick shooter that you play on a single plane, right? Because that's quick and fast. We made the stupid decision not to do that. So we were like, okay, this is all going to be fine, it's all chilled. And then we were like, but all the bloody buildings are constantly in the way. It's impossible to play. We also had an isometric camera. This is not actually isometric, it's a really pulled out 3D camera, and people couldn't tell foreground, background, it was mental. And you can kind of see we got this 8 degrees of movement thing. And it's funny because in Syndicate Wars, they kind of had the same issue, but they've got a sort of smooth rotation of the camera. And it's kind of like funny, we were working with Syndicate in mind as just kind of like a vague reference, but we ran into a lot of the same technical issues, and our core control mechanic, which is the spinning of the camera and kind of figuring out your perspective, came naturally, and as I think it did for them, where they were trying to figure out how do we do an isometric city. They only had to do kind of flat plane stuff. But yeah, it was kind of like, that actually became, for us, when we were developing, that was our strong point. The link was not Syndicate as much as Syndicate Wars and its camera. Because the camera stuff has been really tricky in this game. So it's just Sean kind of trying to sneak through a guard post. Can you sneak through this one? I suppose you can. These are kind of set up in a Far Cry-ish way. There's a lot of open world game light stuff going on in this game, where it's kind of I don't know if you can just do a quick zoom of the map. You can kind of see these guard posts, which are obviously just straight rips of Far Cry guard posts. Approach them how you want, all that kind of stuff. So let me just tab out. Next image. Okay. So we just got 2 images of GTA, and there's obviously in our game, there's a lot of structural stuff which we've learned from GTA. you know, as you know, any open world has. So it's, you know, it's very easy to say we got inspired by or we stole from GTA. But one of the specific things that I always dreamed of, and you know, what happened with GTA is that, you know, they wanted to up the fidelity of their gameplay, so they went into first person with, you know, GTA 3 or whatever. We still wanted to have some of that fidelity, but keep the perspective, because there's this kind of like, I don't know whether it's like some sort of fantasy of seeing things from this perspective, or, you know, I'm just into Findley things. But you know, you know, when you play GTA 1 and 2, you know, you had all the rooftops that, and you could access a couple of them to get like pickups or whatever, but you couldn't really do anything from them. So we wanted to kind of like see what we could do if we could take that old style of gameplay, but just give it full verticality. So, I mean, GTA obviously has been massively influential throughout this whole thing. You know, some of our, you know, our literal control selection has been taken from GTA 5, and a couple of our other UX-y stuff, and obviously just the general mission setup. So let's just see if we can get through what's next. I don't even know. There's the map. Can I just jump to map? So one of the things we took from GTA 2 was we've got these kind of factions in the world, and you kind of are doing work for a corporation, and you end up doing assassinations of these other factional leaders. So kind of on the right there, in the top right, there's the nudist faction, and they've got this kind of naturalistic area. They're called the Commandos. In the sort of the top middle now, I'm spinning there, there's these kind of Yakuza monks, and they've got this kind of traditional temple area. So you can kind of see how we actually kind of just took that sort of model of, in GTA, the kind of central area, or it was, I think, GTA 2 with the Zaibatsu. It was one of the strongest areas that I remember in early gaming, was the Zaibatsu headquarters. I always kind of go back to it, because I remember kind of preparing myself to go in there. So you kind of have this core area, and then you kind of branch out into these various kind of corporate headquarters to do your various missions. I mean, this is all, we kind of just chuck the stuff in because it's references, but so this is a little bit more technical, and it might be a little bit more boring, but I don't know what's a good example. Maybe the Twin Punks? I don't know if you can do the mission itself. So in terms of how the missions were structured, we wanted to make a free-form, our main mission type, which is assassinations. We wanted it to be quite free-form, in that you can kind of stealth your way through, or you can fight your way through, or whatever. And Metal Gear Solid 5 is like one of my favorite games. And we've actually got like a factory, which is like a direct visual like sort of rip-off of Mother Base or whatever. But one of the things I loved about GTA 5 is they had this structure where you kind of approached from inland. So I don't know if you remember, it was kind of in a desert or whatever. You approached from inland, and you kind of had like some sort of compound like nestled against a mountain or something. So you could choose the approach, but there was lots that were kind of locked behind, like with cliffs or something behind it. So you couldn't kind of come from full 360. You kind of have half a sort of, you could choose which area to approach, but after that, you kind of had to find your way through. So we've actually taken a lot of that into our game. So in this mission, you got to get to the top of this kind of, I don't know what you, just a series of buildings, to assassinate someone. But there's kind of a few ways in, and you can actually sit back and snipe out a lot of these guys, say from, I don't know if you can, oh, you can't teleport at the moment, but you can do a little bit of preparatory sniping, and then you can then kind of sneak in and do like some key kills. So we kind of, and it was actually at the time when we started this, I was playing Metal Gear Solid 5, and I loved the way they structured a lot of their missions. So, you know, I just wanted to talk about how we stole from them, basically, as with everyone else. This is like one of the more interesting areas, and we kind of always talk about it. It was, you know, this is set in a future Tokyo, and it's a sci-fi game. And as you'd expect it to be kind of like dark neon lit stuff, and this is actually our neon-y bit, and we just spoke about it on the stream. A lot of the sort of one of the interesting things that we've done is we've taken that sort of sci-fi Tokyo, and we've kind of decided to make it sort of bright and colorful, and kind of take that neon thing and flip it on its head. And this is kind of like one of the only areas that is still a throwback to what you might expect from a sort of sci-fi sort of Tokyo game. And you can see here Sean's doing like one of the more stealthy routes. So I don't know if it was like that in Metal Gear Solid. I mean, Metal Gear Solid had sort of stealth to its core, but we've built in a few options for stealth for players. So you'll be able to kind of find these sort of sneaky routes, and you have some pretty tricky little jumps to do. And you might end up in a pretty tricky situation. I don't know how you're going to get out of this now. Can I tab just to get this done here? So I mean, this is probably a good place. So obviously, when making the game, you know, we had obviously overcomplicated everything. It was like a very kind of just sticky game to play, and it was actually our publishers that were like driving us to kind of like clean everything up, cut features, and all this kind of stuff. And I had played a lot of Hotline Miami, but you know, when you're sort of deep in dev, you can't see you know, your own game with any kind of perspective. And they would just like play that game again and just tell us how it feels. And you know, the main thing about Hotline Miami is the speed of the restarts. Obviously, the gameplay itself is really fantastic. It's really hard. But I think the core thing with that game, is the restart. So as we got further into dev, we had to start looking at games that have done sort of action really well. And I think Hotline Miami, and there's a few others that, as you can see, are the greatest examples. So we actually started playing those games because we needed to be reminded of what actually a good game is. And a good game is fast, and it's fun, and there's no kind of barrier to you having the fun. So as you can see, Sean's kind of you're not supposed to try and fight here because it's really tricky terrain or whatever, but Sean's doing it anyway. He's switching to mouse and keyboard. This is PC Gamer Weekend, so we can show how sort of fast the mouse and keyboard is in comparison. But yeah, when you die, it's instant respawn. And it was just, you know, we had meetings with Mode 7, and they were just like, just make it instant. And we were like, no, we need this and that. And they were just like, just make it instant. Just do Hotline Miami. Just make it instant. And eventually we were like, all right, that's what we'll do. So yeah, this is a really tricky area to fight in. There's so many level changes. We've got some areas which are kind of more flat, which are kind of more built to spec. It is obviously very fun fighting here, because you can see the AIs jumping around and trying their best. But Sean is quite good. There we go. I think that's pretty much it for the images. Obviously, it wasn't just the game design, but also the art stuff that we just had to rip stuff off. And this is our last little slide. This is the Logicoma from the standalone complex. You know, we didn't have the luxury of weeks of preparatory drawings and conceptual exploration in our game. So we had to kind of make some quick decisions, and it was like, we want robots. What's our favorite robots? It's, you know, the Tachicomas and the Logicomas from Ghost in the Shell, so we were like, let's do those then. Sean just got killed by a Nemesis assassin, which are civilian, they pretend to be civilians, and they attack you. So that's something that happens later in the game. I think Sean, just to kind of finish off here before we go to questions, Sean's going to just show the robots, and it's a very hard mission. This one, some people are going to have a bit of fun with this one. That comes a little later in the game, but it just shows the brutality of the robots. Put God mode on. You should probably put God mode on. Just so, yeah. So incoming. And this is that's the spider tank, obviously from the Ghost in the Shell film, slightly modified version, and then there's the little Logicomas. In this battle, they actually kind of hurt themselves, which is quite fun, and they're their own worst enemies. You can see how they kind of hop around. We kind of enjoyed building these guys. They got really cool sound effects. They're slightly over-engineered, but there's a few moments of that. No more spoilers. So yeah, so you know, I think just sort of as a conclusion, you know, we had very little time to do all of this stuff. And I think the act of stealing, I mean, we call it that, but it's taking inspiration and learning, whatever you want to call it, has been absolutely necessary for us. Not only because it made the game feasible, but because we didn't know what we were doing. So we had to do that. That was a part of our process. And anyone else making a game, I would recommend it, especially early on, to learn from people who've done this stuff and do it well. We're not necessarily going to be in that sort of level of quality, but I think it's a good place to start looking at other games. So yeah. So if there are any questions, we'll put it to the floor.
I don't think you give yourself enough credit for how distinctive it looks compared to the things you're inspired by. I was wondering if you kind of took any inspiration from the Wii U game Mighty No. 9, which kind of has a similar sort of perspective. And
no, not specifically, but I think it's in the similar headspace, because it's that colorful kind of madness, sort of madnessy thing. But no, not specifically that game. I'm here at PC Gamer, and I hope no one from Xbox or PlayStation is here, but we play PC games. So we're fairly hardcore in that respect. At home, at least. For business we do have the consoles and whatever, but no. I've never actually had a Wii U, so yeah. Any other questions? No?
Two-part question. One, how long has this been in development? Forgive me for not knowing. And two, how similar or dissimilar is the game in its current state from your original vision?
Okay, well, it's been in dev. We went full-time in October of 2015, so it's been a year and 4 months. Pretty much done now. We got a prototype together over a couple of months before that, which is where that's how we got our money, and our publisher, which is Mode 7, by the way, who made Frozen Synapse. Wait, what was the second part of the question again? How much has it changed? A lot. A lot of people told us not to do open world as our first game because only idiots do that. And we thought we were just being arrogant when we were like, no, we can do it. It was actually just because we're being idiots. Doing open world is so hard, and there's so many problems that came up, and so many changes that needed to happen throughout the process. So I think visually we were kind of like, we kind of had the look down very early on, and it was just like, cool, we'll stick with that because now we have to make a game, and we've got the style. Now we have to make a bucket load of content. And then be an actual fun game. So yeah, it's kind of like some of it was set early on, but we discovered a lot in the process, especially because it's a very open world game. Don't do that. Anyone who's thinking about making games, don't do it.
I was going to ask, is it feasible to play it as a bullet hell shooter? Because it looks like it.
Well, there's a lot of the missions we've got kind of a lot of variety, let's say, but we do have an area which is specifically built for the bullet hell stuff, and we kind of put this in a bit later on. Sean's actually going to show you another fun, but this is kind of like where we discovered. This bit was where we discovered the bullet hell of the game for real, because we've got quite intricate areas, and this was our first open area, and just seeing kind of all the bullets flying around, we were like, geez, that actually is kind of awesome. So we developed another area next to this, which is just about the bullet hell. So whilst a lot of the game it might be a bit tricky, some bits are easier than others to do bullet helly stuff. There is some stuff that's specifically designed for, and this is actually this gets awesome, I think. Just kind of dodging, and this is where through this we discovered our game actually do require cover often. So you're going to be dodging in and out of cover, and sometimes when you kind of push for it, you can try the run through the bullet hell. But yeah, so Sean had to switch to keyboard and mouse because it's okay on controller, but you have to just be really good. So yeah, any other questions? No? One more.
Is it like Fez in terms of the 3D being just wherever your pixels are, you can land on it, because it looks like you're doing some crazy.
I think the camera being locked it kind of looks like that, but it is just pure 3D. And actually, you know, when we started making this game, we kind of had.
Ladies and gentlemen, American Truck Simulator is starting at 4:30 on the PC Games stage.
When we started doing the problem with the buildings in the way, we had a smooth camera, and it just wasn't efficient enough. And in the middle of combat, you wanna tap 3 times or whatever and know where the camera is going to be, because you want to be reactive. So we kind of put this locked 8 thing, and very quickly it looked like it was obviously Fez, and there was that other one, Echochrome. If you remember that, everyone was like, oh, so you can line up the foreground with the background and like make new bridges, and there's a bit that actually looks a bit like Escher or whatever. And I was like, no, you know, we're not that good. So it's just 3D, and it's the camera's there just to help you quickly rotate. So
I'd like to say thank you very much to Sean and Maciek.